The riskiest financial decision you ever make is depending on a single employer. And you, a CFO, a person whose entire job is to identify and manage risk, are doing exactly that, especially after 40. I'm not saying this to provoke you. I'm saying this because I made the same mistake as a CCO and a CEO for over 20 years. And I learned what it actually costs the hard way. This video is about a different model. One where your expertise works for you, not for a single org chart that can restructure you out of existence on a Tuesday morning. Stay with me for the next 15 minutes. The math is going to make sense. Let me tell you what happened to me. I had been in corporate functions for over 20 years. Senior leadership delivered results that were objectively measurable, shortened the sales cycle, built systems that made the finance functions leaner and more accurate, reduced costs, increased profits. One morning, the director of the holding structure called me in before a major board meeting, closed the door, told me they had decided to part ways. And this is the part I still find remarkable. He said the meeting needs to go ahead as planned, as if nothing happened. So I went into the boardroom, ran the meeting, presented the numbers, answered and asked questions professionally, competently, completely, while knowing I had just been let go. That is how the end of a corporate career looks like in practice. Not a dramatic scene, a closed door, a short conversation, and the boardroom you still have to walk into. I'm not the only one. The pattern is everywhere. Companies call it restructuring, strategic realignment, organizational optimization. The vocabulary is always careful. What actually happens is this. You arrive at the office one morning and there is a box with your things near reception. Security badge deactivated, email address revoked, 20 years of institutional knowledge packaged, taped, and ready to carry to the elevator. There is a name for what is driving this. It is called the Great Unbossing. And it is not a trend in the sense of something that might reverse. It's a structural renegotiation of how companies use senior expertise. What it means specifically, companies are removing management layers, including senior finance leadership, not because those leaders are underperforming, but because the full-time presence model is no longer the most efficient way to access what they actually need. The market wants your judgment at the moment of the decision, and it doesn't want to pay for the 40 hours of calendar that surround it. The full-time CFO role made sense when financial information was scarce and centralized. You were the person who knew where the numbers live. That world is gone. The numbers live everywhere now. But what remains scarce, genuinely rare, is the ability to interpret that correctly under pressure. You have that ability. The question is how you are packaging it. Here is what makes this harder than it sounds. Getting fired is painful, but what comes after it for most senior executives is even worse. The job market for finance leaders over 40 is not what it was. This is not my perception. It's a documented, structured reality. Recruiters will tell you, off the record of course, that the moment a resume shows 20 plus years of experience, the shortlist gets even shorter. Not because the person is less capable, because the assumption is too expensive, too set in their ways, doesn't understand how things work now. What actually happens? The interviews that do come through offer either a step down in title, a significant cut in compensation, or both. Many resumes simply do not get read. The silence is its own answer. So people pivot to entrepreneurship, which sounds logical. Take 20 years of experience, build something. I tried it too, twice. One business was shut down by COVID. A second one ended when it became clear that my partners and I had fundamentally different goals. A thing that is very easy to miss when you are building and very obvious once you stop. Traditional business has a very specific cost structure. Capital, time, years of losses before profitability, and the dependency on partners, suppliers, and market timing that is largely outside your control. The failure rate is not a myth. So two default paths: find another job, start a business. Both have serious structural problems for someone at your level, at your age, with your specific type of expertise. Which is exactly why the third path is interesting. The market for fractional executives is expanding fast. Depending on the source, it's growing between 60 and 100% year over year. That number will keep moving because the underlying drivers are not going away. Two things are happening simultaneously. First, companies at the enterprise level are increasingly using fractional executives not as a budget solution, but as a strategic one. When you need a genuinely independent point of view, someone who has no political skin in the internal game, you bring in an outsider. A staff CFO manages the existing structure. A fractional CFO can tell the CEO what the internal team already knows but cannot say out loud. Plus, sometimes CEO or shareholders needs backup. To create pressure on existing CFO. Or they need someone to support, not to assess or advise, but someone who can roll the sleeve and own some delivery pieces. Second, the small and mid-market segments. Companies doing 5 to 50 million in revenue genuinely cannot afford a full-time CFO at a market rate, but they are in dire need of CFO-level thinking. Cash management, unit economics, investor credibility, exit preparation. The need is real. The budget for a full-time hire is not. Fractional CFO can show when you are losing money, while accountant cannot. And you don't need 40 hours for that. You need just 20 minutes of pattern recognition to see the analysis of the ad campaign, and you will see the numbers clearly right here, right now. And what about the cost? They pay 30% of the full-time CFO and they get 10% of your time, but 100% of your expertise and zero corporate games and zero wasted time at all. And both of you save huge amount of taxes. It's bargain for both of you. But here is what people get wrong about entering this market. They assume that having the expertise is enough. It's not. To work fractionally at a premium, you need to be visible to the right people, you need a specific and credible service offering, you need case studies that demonstrate results, not responsibilities, and you need to be able to close an engagement without making it awkward for everyone involved. That last part is where most senior executives freeze because selling feels like something other people do. So let me reframe it. The way most people approach business development looks like this. You meet someone at a conference, you explain what you do for 90 seconds, you hand them a card, and then you send a LinkedIn message that says, "Great to connect, let me know if I can help." This is the professional equivalent of asking someone to come home with you on the first date. You get exactly the response you deserve. Effective client development works like medicine. A doctor doesn't pitch a treatment plan in the waiting room. They ask questions, they listen, they run a diagnosis. The recommendation follows from the evidence. By the time they name what they would do, the patient already trusts the process. That is the model, not selling, diagnosing. And the first step is simply being visible enough that the right people end up in your waiting room. For more than 20 years working in corporate finance, it genuinely did not occur to me that there was another way to convert expertise into income. You get a job, you do the job, you get a better job. That was the complete model. Everything else, consulting, fractional work, advisory, felt like something people did after a real career, not during or instead of it. After I had to leave, I went through the standard sequence. Updated the resume, went through interviews, encountered the market I just described. Was offered roles that did not reflect either my experience or what I needed financially. But then, through a conversation, it was not a strategy yet, it was just a simple conversation, I was introduced to a company that needed specific work done. It was about high inventory pressures, bad product range, and bad availability. I quoted a number, they agreed, I did the work, they paid. That sequence sounds simple. What was remarkable about it was how fast it moved. There was no 6 months hiring process, no offer letter negotiation, no probation period. One conversation, one agreement, one wire transfer, done. And by the way, the client got 20x in the first month of my work. So they came back to me a few more times. And the effective hourly rate was meaningfully higher than anything I had been earning in a full-time role. Not because the work was hard, it was not. Because the value was more precisely priced. Here is the mechanism. When you work full-time, your employer buys your calendar in bulk at a discount. They pay for 40 hours per week, including the meetings that produce nothing, the reporting cycles that nobody reads, and the organization overhead that exists because large structures requires coordination. This is what a salary buys. When they work fractionally, you price the specific outcome instead. The cash flow model, the unit economics audit, the investor-ready financial package to do what the client needs. The price reflects the value of the result, not the hours required to produce it. That is a fundamentally different equation. I have since helped several fractional CFOs build their practices. One of them was already hired people and is delivering services at scale. But every one of them started the same way, with a precise service offering and the first client. The precision matters. I do CFO work is not an offering. I help Series B SaaS companies build the financial model and reporting infrastructure they need to raise their next round, and I typically do it in 60 days, is an offering. The specificity is what makes it easy for the right client to say yes. One question to you before we continue. What is actually stopping you from generating income outside of your current corporate role right now? Not the official answer, the real one. Write it below. I read all of them. And if the content so far is useful, subscribe. What comes next in this video is the part most people skip to and usually skip over too fast. Let us get specific about the work itself, because fractional CFO is a label, not a service. What you actually sell are discrete, high-value interventions that produce measurable outcomes for specific types of companies. 3 core services, 3 client segments. Their combination determines your positioning. Most companies at the $5 to $50 million range do not have real-time visibility into their cash position. They find out where the cash went after the months closed. That is a post-mortem, useful for understanding what happened, useless for preventing what is about to happen. KPMG's 2025 CFO Outlook identified liquidity risk management as the top operational concern for mid-market finance leaders, above inflation, above talent acquisition. Deloitte's 2026 CFO Signal Survey found that 61% of growth stage CFOs lack real-time cash visibility. What that number means, the majority of companies where you would operate do not know their actual cash position on a rolling basis. They're navigating by looking out the rear window. You're not just building a report, you're building an instrument, one that tells leadership what is about to happen under different conditions before it happens. The retainer justifies itself every month because the alternative is finding out too late. Who needs this most? SMBs with seasonal cash cycles. Startups burning toward a fundraise. Any company where the CEO is currently getting the cash update from a spreadsheet that someone built 3 years ago and no one fully understands anymore. Entrepreneurs can be brilliant. They've got huge ideas. They understand how to deliver that to the right clients. What they're missing is the system of their work. They never learned it, they don't have experience, so this is where you can help. Most growth stage companies measure LTV and customer acquisition costs in ways that make the business look better than it is. This is not fraud, it's optimism embedded in methodology. CAC is typically understated by 30 to 40%. The undercount comes from attribution gaps, onboarding costs that get expenses elsewhere, early churn that requires reacquisition spend, and sales cycle overhead that never makes it into the calculation. LTV is typically overstated, especially the expansion revenue assumptions, which are almost always based on the best cohorts, not the average ones. The result? A leadership team that believes they have a scaling problem when they actually have a unit economics problem. Those are different problems. Scaling a broken unit model doesn't fix the model, it accelerates the loss. Your job here is to segment by cohorts, find the real numbers, and separate the segments that are actually working from the ones that look like growth but are consuming equity. Then you give leadership something specific to act on. The reason founders pay for this and pay well is that the diagnosis changes the decision. Not just the financial model, the actual strategic decisions about where to acquire customers, which products to double down on, and which segments to stop subsidizing. Who needs this most? Series A and B companies preparing for the next race. E-commerce businesses with complex customer acquisition across multiple channels. SaaS companies where the gross retention and net retention numbers are telling different success stories. Service 3 is exit-ready architecture. Every company should be able to open its data room tomorrow. Almost none of them can. What exit readiness actually requires? Clean and documented cap table. Auditable revenue recognition that holds up after scrutiny. Normalized EBITDA with defensible add-backs. Board documentation that tells a coherent story, and financial reporting that a new owner could understand without 2 weeks of context-setting conversations. The financial impact is documented across mid-market M&A transactions from 2024 to 2025. Companies that arrive at a sales process operationally and financially prepared command EBITDA multiples 25 to 35% higher than structurally compatible companies that do not. Apply that premium to total enterprise value, and this is not a finance engagement. It is a return. Frame it that way to the founder. I will spend the next 12 months building a financial infrastructure that could add 8 figures to your exit check. That is a different conversation that I will clean up your books. It produces a different retainer. Who needs this most? Founder-owned businesses approaching a first institutional raise of sale. PE-backed companies 18 to 36 months from an exit. Any company where the CEO knows a transaction is eventually coming but has not yet made the financial infrastructure match that ambition. The 3 core services give you a financial practice. These 3 determine the ceiling. Alpha 1, AI, finance stack integration. Finance departments at the $20 to $150 million range are typically running 3 to 6 humans to perform work that a properly configured AI agent stack completes in 4 to 6 hours. It's not because the people are inefficient, because the automation has not been designed. Your role is an architect. Audit the existing workflows, identify what is machine appropriate, configure the stack, and hand off the operational model. The deliverable is overhead reduction with no accuracy loss. It shows up immediately on the P&L. Companies pay specifically for that. Alpha 2. M&A integration for PE firms. Lower middle market private equity firms buy companies. Then they need someone to integrate the finance function of the acquisition into a structure that actually works. In 6 to 9 months, with a defined outcome, they do not want a full-time CFO on payroll for a fixed duration project. This is a sniper model. You come in with a specific mandate, execute it, and exit with the invoice. Private equity firms that use you once and are not disappointed route every similar situation back to you. Their referral networks are tight and have long memory. Alpha 3, financial oversight for AI startups. The average AI founder can architect a production-grade machine learning pipeline. They cannot tell you their burn multiple, their gross margin by product tier, or the specific month their runway ends after a conservative scenario. This is not a character flaw, it's a focus problem. They are building the product and someone else needs to build the financial infrastructure around it. Your role here is not the spreadsheet, it's the discipline. The ability to translate investor-facing financials into operational decisions the founder can actually execute. Price it as existential risk management, not bookkeeping. Okay, here is the summary of what I have argued. The full-time CFO model is a packaging problem. It handles your judgment, which is rare and highly valuable, with your calendar, which is neither. The market is moving towards buying this judgment directly without the calendar attached. That shift is called fractional leadership, and it is accelerating. The 2 default alternatives, finding another senior role or starting a traditional business, both have structural problems for someone at your level, at your stage. The fractional path does require capital, does require partners, and does require 6 months of runway before the first payment arrives. What it does require, a precise service offering, enough visibility to be found by the right people, and the ability to convert a conversation into an engagement without making it awkward. Those are learnable skills. I know because I had to learn all of them through trial and error over several years. The fractional launch scheme compresses that learning into 90 days. Positioning, lead generation, retainer structure, client delivery, contract mechanics. Everything that took me years is documented and sequenced. But start here before anything else. There is a fractional revenue calculator linked below. It takes about 1 minute, you enter your sector, your years of experience, your key competences. It gives you a realistic estimate of what a fractional practice could look like for you, what a 3 or 4 clients portfolio generates, at what retainer levels in your specific market. And that's a bottom line estimation of selling your work by hours without project fees and about the success bonuses. Most people who run it are surprised by the numbers, usually in the right direction, getting angry. It took me years to build a system that reliably generates clients, closes retainers, and grows without the chaos of starting from scratch every single time. You do not need years, but you do need to start. Calculated in the description, this is where to begin.